Could this be Obi-Wan, Sherlock Clouseau, the infamously named Inquisitor from the Rogue Trader Warhammer 40,000 rulebook? Well, what he certainly is the start of a lineage of figures to represent Inquisitors on the tabletop in Warhammer 40,000. And although this particular miniature was later rebranded as a more general adventurer, Games Workshop has produced plenty of dedicated Inquisitor figures over the years, and in this video I'm going to be showing them to you. I will only be looking at the Inquisitors themselves, not their henchmen, and only for Warhammer 40,000 itself. I will not be looking at the 54mm scale Inquisitor game, nor will I be looking at the special diorama figure that was released for Black Library. But without further ado, let's take a look at the mysterious agents of the Inquisition. This well-armoured Inquisitor was released as part of the Rogue Trader Adventurers range, but he was specifically identified as an Inquisitor, and the sculpt appears to have been based off some of the artwork in the Rogue Trader rulebook covering Inquisitors, although he has had a bolt gun added. Which is interesting because at the time, I'm pretty sure that Inquisitors really only carried pistols. It was only later on that they acquired a wider variety of weapons. And this is the other Inquisitor that was released as part of the Adventurers range in the early days of Rogue Trader. And the backpack here comes with a cloak on it. And I believe this is actually the pack and cloak that were supposed to come with this figure, although in more recent years I've seen it obviously with whatever backpacks people could find to go on it. Luckily, I was able to get this early enough that the original pack and cloak were still available. With the release of the Realm of Chaos Slaves to Darkness companion, there was a Grey Knights army list in the back of the book, and that included entries for Inquisitors, and Games Workshop actually released a dedicated Inquisitor blister pack, and this figure is one of the 3 that was included in that pack, armed with his chainsword and plasma pistol, and now the backpacks go to the same plastic sprue that was used with Space Marines, particularly single pose metal marine blisters that were available at that time. The Slaves to Darkness army list gave Inquisitors access to a lot more weaponry than they had previously. So this figure is armed with not only a power glove, but also a plasma gun, rifles, and even heavy weapons now being available to the agents of the Inquisition. Once again, clad in powered armour, and he uses a marine-style plastic backpack. One thing I've noticed about this particular sculpt is he has what I would regard as a medieval monk-style haircut. I'm pretty sure there's a specific name for that, but I don't know what it is. But I think that suggests that this particular character may have been supposed to have been recruited from the priesthood. And the third and final Inquisitor in the General Inquisitors blister pack, released at the time of Slaves to Darkness, is this one, again in powered armour, with the plastic marine backpack, and he has a power fist again, but this time we have a combi weapon in his other hand, combi weapons being somewhat new at this time. They weren't in the original Rogue Trader rulebook. And of course, all they did was combine the effectiveness of other types of weapon. They were rather rare, supposedly, but I suppose it fits that somebody as important as an Inquisitor might be able to get his hands on one. Also, with the release of Slaves to Darkness, we learned about the Ordo Malleus, the dedicated demon hunters of the Inquisition. And to go with the army list in Slaves to Darkness, Games Workshop also released a blister pack of 3 Demon Hunters. Again, all of these use the plastic marine backpacks, but their armour is, well, rather unusual, I'd say, and they have some very curious weapons. This particular one has the newly released Psy Cannon. He's also described as having a Force Sword officially, but the design of it, I've noticed it's got all these bones and things on, so I've painted it up to look more organic and bloody, and I think that actually it's probably meant to be a demon weapon rather than a force weapon, because agents of the Ordo Malleus could occasionally get access to such things. The second of the figures from the Ordo Malleus Demon Hunter blister also wears some pretty unusual powered armour. Again, it was described as having a Force Sword, but I actually think it looks far more like it's supposed to be a demon weapon. And in addition to this, he is armed with a combi weapon again. The third and final figure that was included in the Demon Hunters blister has powered armour that I think is perhaps the least unusual out of the 3. And also his sword, that's described as a Force Sword, I think actually looks more like that sort of weapon than the demon weapons that I think the other 2 figures are armed with. With the release of rules for Terminator armour, Games Workshop also produced a couple of Inquisitors in Terminator armour, although I don't think there are actually rules for these released initially. I think we had to wait till about 2nd edition to get those. This particular figure is a demon hunter of the Ordo Malleus, and he's armed with a Psy Cannon and a Force Rod. I have actually seen another version of this in some photographs where people have taken the same metal body, but they have put on weapons that come from a Space Marine librarian in Terminator armour, in particular his Force Axe, but I'm not going to include that here because I don't actually think it was a properly released miniature. As well as the Ordo Malleus Demon Hunter, we also got this far more generic Inquisitor in Terminator armour, and he is armed with a Power Fist. This includes a number of Jokero digital weapons, and also a combi weapon, which appears to be a fusion of Bolt Pistol and Needler. The next new releases for Inquisitors actually came way forward in 3rd edition. There were no new releases in 2nd at all. And with the release of Codex Demon Hunters, we got Inquisitor Courtiers. Originally, this figure was released in metal in a box set that included a small retinue. But later on he was released in an individual blister of his own, and he became part of the Finecast range, and this particular figure here is in fact cast from resin rather than metal. As well as Inquisitor Courtiers, we also got 3 more generic Ordo Malleus Inquisitors released with Codex Demon Hunters, one of which is this Inquisitor here with his combi weapon and a rather large power sword. And the next of the generic Demon Hunters released in the 3rd edition is this figure here, who, in addition to his rather large sword sheathed across his back and the bolter in his right hand, he is also prominently displaying a grimoire which perhaps contains lists of the true names of the demons he has fought. The last of the generic Demon Hunters has a very similar pose to the previous one. But in place of the grimoire, he is holding his power sword in his hand. Also, the head and cloak sculpts are slightly different. But more significantly, this figure, while originally released in metal, was later changed to resin and is still available from Games Workshop. You can tell this particular figure is in fact resin, because the sword's bent, and no matter how many times I try and straighten it out, it always seems to want to go back to being this odd shape instead. Later on in 3rd edition came the release of Codex Witch Hunters, and with it we got some witch hunting Inquisitors. Most significant one is Inquisitor Karamazov, mounted here on his Throne of Judgment, and this is probably the closest thing to a vehicle that I'm going to be showing off in this video. Interestingly, the design of the legs is almost identical to that of contemporary Space Marine dreadnoughts. But if I zoom in on the feet and get into focus properly, if I can, yes, you might just about be able to make out that the shape of the foot is actually designed to be identical to the eye of the Inquisition. So wherever he goes, he's leaving footprints that shows the Inquisition has been there. We also had a number of generic Witch Hunter Inquisitor figures released to go with the Codex, and this particular miniature originally came in a box set, again with a small retinue, just like Inquisitor Courtiers for the Demon Hunters. And just like Inquisitor Courtiers, this figure was originally released in metal and later on became available in resin instead. And this is a resin figure, although somehow all of the weapons have remained perfectly straight. There were also 3 individual Witch Hunter Inquisitors released to go with the Codex, and each of these bears a startling resemblance to one another. All of them are female, and all of them wear similar styled powered armour and have very similar hairstyles. So the differences between them really come down to the equipment they have. This particular one has this rather long Inferno pistol and a walking cane, which apparently is also supposed to be a null rod. And with the second of those 3 figures here, I'm sure you can see the resemblance to the previous one in terms of armour design and hairstyle. The difference being that this particular Inquisitor is armed with a power maul and a plasma pistol instead. And the last of these similarly designed Witch Hunter models has a large power sword braced in her left hand, whilst in her right she has an interesting combi weapon which appears to combine a bolt weapon with a hand crossbow. And I think there was actually a very specific piece of war gear in the Codex that this would represent. Now, interestingly, here we are with a 3rd edition figure. Of course, we're now just into 10th edition. And this is, in fact, the last time that Games Workshop released a generic Inquisitor figure. After this, every single one of them is going to be a named character. During 4th edition, we had the 30th anniversary of Games Workshop, and to mark that, they released this Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor in the shape of Gideon Law, an Inquisitor so fanatical he even goes around killing navigators and astropaths, believing all forms of psychers are inherently corrupt. It'll be interesting how he would reconcile that belief with the fact that the Emperor himself was mankind's most powerful psyker ever. This figure, interestingly, only available for a short time, did in fact appear on a flyer later on suggesting it was going to be re-released. And I know this because I spoke to a staff member at Games Workshop who was very hopeful that he was going to be able to get his hands on one, having missed it the first time round. And unfortunately, he was given the duty of going around the shops that had received this flyer with a marker pen to scribble this figure out, because it wasn't being re-released at all, and its inclusion on the flyer was a complete mistake. The Ordo Xenos finally made an appearance during the years of 4th edition as well, although for that we have to thank Forge World, who brought us Solomon Locke, who was deeply involved in the Amphilean project, which formed the basis for Volume 4 of Imperial Armour, and he was made available with his small retinue. This is just the Inquisitor figure himself, of course. As I've already said, I'm not including retinue figures in this video. Later on in 4th edition, Forge World also gave us the Siege of Vrax, Volume 7, particularly Part 3, which had Inquisitor Hector X of the Ordo Malleus included in it. Again, he did come with a retinue, but I'm not going to show those to you now. And you may notice the painting style of this is far better than any of the other figures in this video, and that's because I didn't paint it. I got this figure second-hand off eBay. Hector X hasn't been available for a long time now. And since he was already painted, I didn't need him to fit in with any of the other figures in my collection because he's an individual character. I decided it would be a waste and a shame to actually remove the paint and repaint him to my standard. And that is why this figure looks so much better than any of the others in this video. We now had to wait until 7th edition before we got another new Inquisitor figure, and that came in the shape of Katerina Greyfax of the Ordo Hereticus. Again, this figure has a sort of combi weapon of bolter and crossbow. And the significant thing about this particular figure is the material it is made of. This is the first Inquisitor that was made of plastic rather than either metal or resin. Gregor Eisenhorn had long been a part of Warhammer 40,000 lore since the Eisenhorn trilogy of books by the great Dan Abnett, and a figure was released at 54mm scale for the Inquisitor Specialist game, but we had to wait until 8th edition to actually get a Warhammer 40,000 scale figure. And this particular miniature depicts him at a younger age than he is for the Inquisitor scale figure. And this is a model I thought was going to just be a limited run one, but it is still available from Games Workshop. And from the slight bend in the staff, you can probably tell that he is made from resin. And also during 8th edition, the Ordo Xenos gets a second dedicated figure. This time, Kyria Draxus was released, and this again is a multi-part plastic figure, which is in keeping with the current standard for Games Workshop miniatures. And the final figure in this video was released towards the tail end of 9th edition in the form of Erasmus Carter Volnus. And he is another multi-part plastic figure, which actually was only available for very short times in different places, because this figure is the 2022 store anniversary figure. So it was only available to order from each store for about a week or so, although at different times of the year, depending on which store you went to. But what would one of my videos looking at multiple models be without a final overview of all of those figures gathered together, starting with the possible Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau from the Rogue Trader years, going right the way through with the various different Ordos that were given, and then ending finally with Erasmus Carter Volnus from 2022. I am sure that Games Workshop will be releasing more Inquisitors in years to come, though perhaps not quite with the same frequency they do of Space Marine captains. But one thing is that you should always bear in mind is that nobody expects the Imperial Inquisition. Thanks for watching. Bye.